There are cards in Marvel Snap that haven't seen play in months, and some of them even years. The play rates on these are so low, and I do genuinely think they could benefit from having these buffs. Some of these are small tweaks, some of them are reworks, and one change that could make an entire new archetype, honestly, and I'm pretty excited to show you guys. So I know Second Dinner tends to not want to alter Series 1, Series 2 cards too much because it can hinder the new player experience, and I mean, that is completely understandable, but I don't think any of these changes I'm willing to propose today are necessarily going to have too much of an impact on that. So starting with a small one, Morph. Now, Morph is a card that most people might look at and say that they've never seen before, partly because it changes into another card, but maybe the main reason is because it never actually sees any play. Now, Morph's problem tends to come from his ability being too random, so here is my proposed change. Change him to copy the leftmost card in your opponent's hand. Now, instead of being completely random, there is some logic to it, allowing it to always be the left card. More than likely means it's going to be a card your opponent has left in their hand for some time, making it a bigger card most of the time. And there is also a soft sort of counter synergy to this with Mother Ascani. Now, Mother Ascani is running rampant, and it's possibly likely that Second Dinner nerfs that card. But I do think having Morph in the game allows people to counter her in a way. You're going to play Mother Ascani? Well, Morph is then going to copy that card, which is guaranteed to have a buff, which I think is sort of a soft counter in a way. Next up, I have a little bit of a controversial one, Baron Mordo. Now, I think everybody agrees that Baron Mordo needs a buff. The only problem with that is Baron Mordo is going to be an annoying card if it's ever strong in the meta. So I kind of wanted to give it an ability that makes its existing ability more useful than it is. So my rework is, I'm changing it to a 2/1 to gain the power equal to the cost of your opponent's top card. And then afterwards set that card to 6. So it's a 2/1 that could become a 2/7, for example. That is really high rolling, but then if your opponent's card is 6 cost giving you 2/7, you see where I'm going with this? You're not actually really doing anything with the setting it to 6 cost, which would then make old Baron useless. But new Baron becomes a 2/7, which is quite strong. Also, something else I didn't consider with Baron, if your opponent's top card is Fin Fang Foom, you're basically buffing the opponent's deck. I only just thought about that. Same with if it's like Arisham or Dormammu or something like that. So I suppose this way it becomes a 2/8, which is kind of insane stats, I can't lie. But if you're hitting a 1 cost, it's becoming a 2/2, with therefore knowing your opponent's top card was a 1 cost that is now became a 6 cost card. I've still kept the whole, at the end of like the last turn it reverts to its original cost. This is a bit of a scary one. I don't really know if people would be okay with it. I like the fact that it gains the cost. I'm only scared about repeating this ability. So if you were to like, I guess Wong Baron Mordo, or Baron Mordo Absorbing Man, something like that, you know? There is still the thing of like, it's sort of similar to how Star-Lord functioned, where you're basically repeating the ability that's giving the card buffs for itself, but it's not getting anything more beneficial than just setting your opponent's card to 6. And if you're becoming a 2/7, you know that the other card's ability hasn't done anything. I think I'm quite content with this. There is an argument to make it a 2/0, which I also could see. But let me know how you guys feel about this one, because it's the most controversial one I was a bit nervous about going into this with. But yeah. So now for something bigger. This is the one that could create an entire new archetype, and I'm curious to see what you guys think about this one as well. So front row and back row have been in the game for quite a while, and there aren't too many cards that utilize this, but there are some cards I believe could incorporate this into their ability. So, Warpath. Now you might see where I'm going with this. Warpath currently needs one of your other locations to be empty, which is way too restrictive, basically giving your opponent a free win on a location. So my proposal is to take him down to 4/3, but give him +3 power for each empty back row. So this doesn't mean each slot in the back row that's empty, it just means each location's back row that's empty. So if you have all 3 of them empty, use a 412, which is pretty strong, but also restrictive in a way, because say you have 2 cards at one location and your opponent is winning there, you then know if you're to play another card to fill the back row, you're going to be nerfing Warpath's power by 3. Which gives a bit more interesting utility to the card. And he's no longer asking you to abandon locations, he's asking you to be smart with positioning. Next up is Namor, and similar idea. I'm changing Namor back to a 4-5 instead of the 4-6, which he currently is, but giving him 5 power if your back row is empty. So again, he goes from needing to be the only card in the location, which having 4-11 at a location, nowadays most people just go above 11 power very easily, so Namor is completely useless. But now he can be a 4-10 if you have no cards in the back location. And next up we have Orka to complete the trio, which I'm taking back to a 6-10 and keeping the +7 power, but it's now if your back row is empty. So again, scrapping the whole needing to be on his own thing, allowing you to just play everything in the front row. Kind of making a whole new archetype in a way, where you're going to leave your back row empty. I do foresee this being quite strong. I don't see it being game-breaking by any sense of the word, but it gives some interesting utility to these cards, and I do think people would actually start playing them in the meta. Now, if anything like this were to become too strong, you have Clog. Now, Clog doesn't really see that much play these days, but if a deck like this starts showing up, Clog then kind of neutralizes it, giving both decks kind of a meta position, which I think is an interesting sense. If this became too popular, Clog then destroys it, kind of keeping them both at a midline. I don't think this kind of keep back row empty location would become a staple of the meta because of this being an effect, but I also think it gives these cards more utility, more interesting spots to be in. And I think I'm happiest with this change out of all the ones I'm going to propose today. I could very easily see them implement something like this. Spider-Woman has been irrelevant for a very long time, and you would think that a 5-8 that then inflicts -1, basically becoming a 5-12 if your opponent's location is full, would be strong, but this card has a very, very low meta share. So my fix is simple. I'm going to keep her on reveal, but I'm going to give her an activate. Now, these upcoming cards are basically going to be ones that I'm implementing activates into, because I do think they could utilize them, whilst keeping their original ability. So this activate is repeat your on reveal. Basically meaning that you can afflict cards at the enemy location with -1 power again. 2 uses. There are a couple of cards that will start looking at this. You'll have Jocasta, for example. Jocasta repeats the activate, which repeats the on reveal, and possibly something like Wong, or maybe even Absorbing Man. Absorbing Man copies this ability, but then you activate can use it again. Obviously then it becomes a bit of a problem because Spider-Woman's 5 cost, you can't exactly play Absorbing Man after it to then activate the Absorbing Man, you know what I mean? You'd have to have a turn 7 or something like that. I think this is interesting because your opponents are not always going to have a full location, so even if you're afflicting -1 power and then afflicting it again, you're not always hitting the full 4 cost. Now, I've lowered her to a 5-7 as well to kind of account for this, but I do think this is more interesting. Might not necessarily see much play because at a 5 cost she's kind of an awkward card, but it makes her slightly more interesting, and Aurora will start looking at this card. Next up, I have a very controversial one, Howard the Duck. I am lowering Howard to a 1-1, keeping its ongoing ability to see the top card of the deck, but then giving it an activate to give that card -1 cost. So he goes from a bit of a meme card at that point to something quite useful. He was only ever really seen in Living Tribunal decks, and after Living Tribunal took that stray nerf recently, with the duplicative scaling going to just another time, it gives Living Tribunal a way to get one of your 6 cost cards down to 5 cost. Now, I don't think this necessarily makes Howard broken by any means. I do think, again, it will probably start being seen in Aurora decks, which could be slightly scary, giving Aurora a -1 cost, but also, if you play it turn 1, you can only start doing the activate turn 2. That's even if you draw it turn 1, which becomes another issue with the card. I think this gives it more utility. It doesn't make the card broken by any means. And I don't know, I think this is quite an interesting one. Let me know what you think about that one in particular, because it could technically be controversial. A 1/1 that you can give -1 cost to any card you see on the top of your deck is kind of scary, but it could also start helping out with the archetype. I think soon there's going to be a couple of cards that give like buffs to the top card of your deck. So in June this is. So I think this card could actually start seeing some play, and I quite like this one as well. And finally, jumping in at the end like he always should do, is M'Baku. So M'Baku is a weird one. I think only really seen in Cerebro 3 and Arasham, and I didn't want to give him too much of a buff because in Cerebro 3 he is quite strong and also catches people off guard quite a lot. I'm giving him an activate on top of his ability to jump back into your deck. Now, this is one I'm not too confident on. I don't necessarily think this is going to be great for M'Baku necessarily, but allowing him to jump back into your deck gives him a bit of a surprise play when he comes back out if your opponent isn't tracking it, I suppose. But also, if he's in a location that you're kind of confident with, sending him back into your deck to have him jump out another location almost guarantees his ability to do that, which this card suffers from. It's very difficult to have him jump out of your deck if you're drawing him all the time. He's still going to take a draw, and if you put him back into your deck, you're probably going to want to do that on the last turn, giving him a bit of a pseudo Kitty Pryde effect. But it makes him slightly more interesting. This is the one I'm least confident that is actually going to help the card see play. But regardless, it was an interesting thought that I thought maybe throwing this in there could be quite fun. So those are my 8 buff ideas. Let me know in the comments which ones you guys would actually like to see in the game. I've got way more cards lined up, and if you guys want a part 2, just let me know, drop a like and a subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.